Jeff, Jim, and Carmela, Part 18. Jim was on his last leg and doing auditions for a radio announcer's job in small market radio. A friend told him he should visit one of the radio stations in the large market, like Atlanta, Georgia, which he did. People who could not move out of the small market into the legitimate large market staffed most of the small-town radio stations. They had a tendency to dislike people who fit the mold of a top-market announcer because of resentment to those who could move up. Hometown folks owned most of the radio stations, and they had seen many people like Jim come and go. Jim had been out of broadcast school for 2 months, and the instructors at the Ace Radio Announcer School knew Jim was one of the best announcers to graduate. They knew Jim preferred the small market, but now Jim was convinced he should go for it in Atlanta. The program director in Atlanta, after listening to Jim's audition tape, hired him for the 8 p.m. to 12 midnight shifts. 4 hours of the top 40 hits of the day, with a few golden oldies from past top 40 charts. The program director told him he had the freedom to program his playlist and choose the golden oldies he thought his audience would like. On Jim's first evening doing the program, he noticed the control room had a direct telephone line. The telephone had a public listing, and it was his discretion to answer it or not. Rather than a ringer, a small red light hanging on the wall would blink if the listeners were calling to speak with the announcer. The little red light blinked almost continuously, and occasionally Jim would answer it and talk to whomever was on the line. Most of the people he spoke with were late-night office workers who always listened to his program. They were interested in knowing something about this new radio announcer, and most gave Jim welcoming words. Jim's program was Monday through Friday, and he had the weekends free unless called in to do a weekend program for some of the weekend people who could not work. Jim could not recall how long he had been at the radio station when one evening, just before signing off the program, he decided to answer the phone. He had noticed the little red control room light blinking all evening. During one of the long songs he always played, when he needed enough time to check the teletype machine or use the bathroom, he decided to play the 7-minute record and answer the telephone. Jim always answered the phone by saying, "Good evening, this is Jim." Most of the people he had heard on the special request line were ordinary-sounding people, both men and women, and sometimes they were drunk. This evening, when he answered the phone, a voice greeted him that caused him to pause because it was like nothing he had heard before. She said, "Hello, my name is Carmela, and I have been listening to your program from your first day on the job. I have never called the station before, but for some reason I wanted to talk to you and let you know I was a listener. I have called this number several times, but it was either busy or no one answered my call. I am always awake when you sign off at midnight. My favorite song is Unchained Melody." Jim had never heard a female voice like this before. The quality of her words and the way she spoke was almost poetic, but he detected sadness in the voice. It was not British, but the pronunciation she used was something he could not pinpoint or had heard before. The only thing Jim could say was, "Thank you." She continued, "If it is okay with you, I will call you occasionally to ask you to play a record for me." Before Jim could begin a conversation with Carmela, she said goodbye. This was a long time before the digital age, and the music was on vinyl records. The long record Jim had chosen ended, and he did something he never did as an announcer. He let the record end, and there was dead air, which in those days was a no-no. He quickly did a station break and started the next record without introducing it. Jim leaned back in his chair and smacked himself on the forehead, knowing he had telegraphed to his mysterious listener that she, intentionally or not, had gotten into his head with her phone call. Jim did not like to hear any announcer have dead air, so he was completely disgusted with himself.